Having multiple passions and interests can feel like your brain is a browser with about 25 tabs open, and you're constantly switching between them, never really progressing through any or developing and learning from any of the tabs. And at the same time, the world is telling you to permanently close them all and focus on one for like the next 50 years. You're not broken and you're not glitching, you're just someone with multiple passions and interests who hasn't found a system and a structure that works for you. Effectively, the usual self-help and productivity advice is leaving you out. That's why in this video, I want to share the system that I built and documented in Notion to manage my own multi-passionate life so that I can be the senior engineer that I am, the content creator, the power lifter, oil paint, travel, all of these things. And I built the system not just based on my own learnings and experiences, but through research, engineering best practices and frameworks, project management, bringing all of these things together to build a coherent system. And the result is that I feel less overwhelmed. I'm actually developing these interests and passions to a high level. I have less FOMO, and when I do want to pivot and change, I can do so not based on emotion or a fleeting thing, but actually on logic. Overall, this is just a lot less stressful and more enjoyable. So let's just get into it. Okay, so I've moved us over to my desk so that we can dive deeper into this. Everything in this is designed to take us from chaos to organization so that we can actually progress and feel fulfilled in all of these things. So how does that happen? Well, this diagram here explains at a very high level how we achieve this. First off, you have the high level vision. So at the top, we need to understand what kind of life we are trying to lead, what values we are governed by, what a optimal life looks like, because this will form the kind of North Star or almost anchor point so that when things start to get complicated or when things start to get murky, you have this high level vision to refer back to. But it's one thing to have a high level vision for your life, but what does that mean in terms of passions and interests? That's when we come down to the layer of the passion board. This is the area in which you are going to document the passions that you have, the stages that they're in. And what this is going to allow you to do is take those passions that you're currently trying to hold in your head, all those tabs that are currently open, and put them onto this page in order for you to be able to minimize the ones in your head and focus in on the season that you're in, which brings us to the next layer. So the seasons are a period of time with some objectives and a few focuses, not every single passion at once, because although I believe very much in the ability to explore and develop multiple passions, we have finite time. And so that's why the season approach is a way for us to make progress, to develop in one area or a couple of areas and passions without neglecting the rest. It's not that they'll never be attended to, we're just making sure that we can make progress in these things, in these areas. But a season is still a little bit too high level, which is why things are further broken down in the system into projects and tasks, things that you can actually pull on as activities to get through in your week, in your day, in a few hours. And all of this is governed by a leaning to take action and reflect, iterate and make progress through your passions and interests. And in my system, I do have these documented, just like, what do I mean by each of these keywords? And that will become apparent as we move through the rest of the system. Okay, so let's actually open up the passion system and see what's inside. So I've already spoken about why this vision is important, but here are the key kind of features, and I started filling this in order to illustrate how this works. My actual one is not on display because, I don't want to expose my whole life, but I just want to show you how this works. So there are a series of questions on this page that are trying to get you to understand what values you have. What does a good life look like to you with all of these multiple passions and interests? And the key thing here is, because you're going to be answering these questions in this document, you also have them to fill in with ChatGPT and use them over there if you're struggling to tease out the real key features, the real key trends in your high level vision in life. I was actually terrified because chat has so much information on me through what I speak to it about regularly that when I just put in my high level visions and values, the ideal day that it drew out was so scarily accurate to what my ideal day would look like. I was like, that's it. It's basically me now. But the key thing here is that if I start to feel lost or like I'm drowning, I can come back to this to ground myself. But now let's start to get into the nitty-gritty of this passion system. So now let's head over to passions and seasons. And you're going to see two boards in this section. The first one is the passion board. So as I mentioned earlier, we need to get all of the things that are in our head, the chaos in our mind effectively, onto paper so we can free up the mental capacity to actually do the passions, not just hold them in our heads. And so that's what this section is all about. And you can categorize them based on where you think you are with that passion. For example, I've put a few of mine here, and you can kind of see my main passions like content creation, powerlifting, engineering, and things of that nature. But I also have a column for potential passions. So these are things that I may have interacted with, Like I probably tried them out to an extent, but they're not quite integrated into my life routinely or as a solid passion yet. And then there's a space for things you're curious on. Like if anything comes up, you see something online, you talk to somebody and you want to note that down, again, instead of holding it in your head, put it onto your board, put it in the curious section. And when it comes time to adding a new one, there's a template for that. So you just add new, give it some information about what it is and any resources or inspiration that you've come across, so that when it comes time to circle back to this passion, you have all of that there. And you can actually view these in different ways. So gallery format, just like this, or if you just want to see your main passions or your potential passions, you can filter through the view that you want. The next step then is to decide that the season we are in now, what is going to be our focus for the next, let's say, month, 2 months, ideally around 3 months. And this is where our seasons come. So let's dive deeper into an example of a season and how you might build it out. So here's one that I've kind of started, and it's on YouTube and business. I would say right now, the focus for me is YouTube growth and content creation and business. Business growth. They're things that I'm interested in, things I want to develop, and they link to my high level vision. So I'm probably going to then, in this passion section, start to make relationships. So I know that I said content creation for YouTube and I mentioned business. So I can tag these. And the reason that you're going to see this a lot is to create threads and connections, because one of the things that you're probably struggling with is everything feeling disjointed, disconnected. And this system here allows me to track things and trace things back. Here in the template, you'll start off by being able to review your passion board again. So it's filled out here. We can see the ones that we might want to pick and think about. And then we're going to choose 5 and we're going to justify them. Why is this particular passion, interest, skill important to you right now? And you're going to have to give a justification here. And it's really important in taking a step back when you are moving through life, when you are adding all these things, to think about why it's here, why I care. Is it just because I saw it on TikTok and somebody I like is doing it? Or is there a real promise here? And I'm not saying that you can't just try things because you saw it on TikTok, but if we're talking about getting to a focus and developing these things, we're going to need to hone in on this justification. But the reality is you're not doing 5. So now we're going to narrow down to 1 to 2 seasonal priorities. I would say 2 is a good number. 3 only if you really feel like you can balance these and your time allows for it. Because remember, we are not abandoning these other passions. We're just saying for this season, we're focusing on, this 1, 2, or 3. And so you want to write those down. The next key thing though is knowing what success in this season looks like. Because one of the issues that I think you have with multiple passions and interests is that we kind of don't know when progress is being made, especially if we don't have a definition of done. This is another concept that we use in engineering and project management is what does done look like? Without that, you could be going forever or basically in limbo. Have we accomplished it? Have we not? Don't know, because we haven't defined what success looks like. So for each of those focal points, each of those passions that you've picked, define what it looks like when success is occurred. Is it that you do 3 oil paintings, that you've recorded 8 videos, that you have launched a product or something of that nature? And make sure they're inputs, right? Don't say something like 100,000 on YouTube, because there are so many things that are out of your control that you can't say you failed in your season because you didn't receive or achieve something like that. The next bit is all about what can you start immediately? What actions can you take for each of these? And this is just to get your head moving for the next stage. Then we need to think logically about how much time we can give to this, how many hours per week. Again, because you're probably putting too much on your plate, you're not stopping to think about how many hours I actually have to dedicate to this, and so you're doing too much. And now with all this information, you can decide how long the season is going to be, right? Is it going to be 6 weeks, maybe more of a sprint? Is it going to be like 90 days, denoted by something like a career pivot? How long is this season going to be for you? And then you can go back to the top and fill that in if you haven't already. If you're getting stuck, here's another point where you can use ChatGPT to help you out. Because you have given all of this information to this document, you can just put that into chat and be like, help me work this out, right? Because it now knows what you're trying to achieve, what success looks like, how many hours a week you can dedicate to this. Probably also you can give information on where you're starting from, and chat can help you come up with a schedule or with a time frame that actually makes sense. So now we have a season, and as you go through life, each of these will be populated and you'll see more seasons. But right now, we're starting with 1. But like I said, a season is still too high level to actually get things done, which is why we then move into projects and tasks. If you have seen my video on how to learn anything, right, which I think has about 200,000 plus views right now, you'll know that projects are a great way to learn a new passion, skill, or develop an interest because they have an outcome, they have defined time, and you can use tasks to break them down into logical and actionable steps, which is what this section here is all about. So if my season involves something like growing my creative brand, or like I said, business, then one of my projects may be to launch a newsletter. So at the project level, that is what I'm doing, but the tasks that make up that may be things like choose a platform, draft the welcome sequence for the email, create a sign up form, right? I have tasks, manageable things that I can do that will help me finish a project, that will add to my season, that allows me to develop my passions and have this high level vision for my life actually actualized. And on this page, and for consistency and being able to review, you can always open up this season overview if you've forgotten. Like when you're doing your projects and tasks, you're like, what did I actually say? Open it up. Remind yourself of what you said success looks like and how much time you had and some of those immediate tasks. Just open it up. And that's when we have the project section and the tasks. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on here. I think most of us probably know how projects work, but if I just open up this one here so I can show you how it works, you can see that there's some information. Again, I have linked my passions here, but now I've got a new kind of tab to link to, and that's the season. I can also see my completion rate of this particular project here because it's made up of tasks. So you fill out this information when you're building out the project and you start to put your tasks here. So those ones that we just said about choose a platform, draft a welcome sequence, create a sign up. Those are all here and I can move these tasks through different stages. And that way I'm actually tracking what I'm getting done again. Projects and tasks are actually a huge part of successful engineering and bringing together teams, which is why I use it so much in my own process and why I knew that it had to be into the system here. Okay, so I think we have a pretty solid base now for the core passion system, right? This is going to allow us to move through our systems, move through these seasons with actual clarity, intention, and ability to develop these things, and knowing that we're not leaving things behind permanently. They're just over there in our passion board. When we're ready to move seasons, we revisit them. But one problem that you will have as someone with multiple passions and interests is knowing when to change course. And that's when it comes time to pivot, and why I want to dive deeper into this section. So you may or may not have watched my video on, I forget what it was called, but I'll leave it up here. But I was talking about a system that we use in tech called the single source of truth. It's a way for us to have a agreed upon system or state that everybody accepts, that nobody can just change. You can't just change it on a whim or because you think something's fancy and you want to develop something and just add it. There are checks, there are balances, and there are systems in place. And your passion system, that thing that we have just been building, is your single source of truth. You have embedded the interest that you have. You have taken the time out to consider capacity, to consider the projects, the tasks. You don't just go changing that on a whim. And these diagrams here just show how it works in tech and how when we do want to bring something into that single source of truth, we have different options. We might decide to pull it in after it has gone past a series of checks and balances. We might consider to leave the branch open and, consider it later, or we say abandon, right? So this is the framework that we borrow from to know when to pivot with multiple passions and interests. And if you do want to, say you have started a season, that season of new Sheba business, but you've thought something has changed, you're gonna have to make a pivot request. And I know this might sound like, oh my gosh, you're making the request to the higher version of you. And so what does a pivot request actually look like? Well, I'm going to show you in this template here. So like all requests, it has a date, but then you have to revisit the season and the focus just to make sure that you are clear on what it is you're trying to achieve. Then you have to ask why you're requesting this. Why do you want to change course? What is it? Is it a change in environment, circumstances? Is it strategic or is it reactive? Then you need to define the type of pivot. Is it a branch, like you want to set off a new branch and explore something else while maintaining the season that you're in? Maybe a new opportunity has come and it makes sense for you to explore this simultaneously. Or maybe you're trying to combine or replace. Maybe you want to shift out one of these passions and put something else in. Or maybe you want to pause the season or cancel it, right? You need to define what it is that you're trying to do. But then you need to explain what the proposed new direction is. It's all well and good saying you're going to make this change, but what does the future look like? What are we trying to get to then once we make a change to this season? And then you need to remember about the long term, the high level vision. Does it link to that, right? Does the change you're proposing still link to that North Star that we have, that anchor point? And then as a final check, just another final check to make sure that this isn't impulsive or irrational and that it's intentional. And then you can make a decision. Now, again, I'm going to keep saying this, but the beautiful thing is if you have this all documented, then you can go and liaise with ChatGPT. Here's all the information I have on the passion, my season, and my pivot request. Do you think this makes sense? Am I being logical, rational? How can I approach this? What changes do I make? You can chat with Chat. Chat with Chat. And so that we've gone through is the core of your passion system, right? This is going to allow you to progress with multiple passions and interests in a meaningful and non-chaotic way. But then I kind of want to go a little bit to the day-to-day. Because this passion season, these projects and so forth are operating even still on a slightly too high a level for day-to-day progress, this is where our check-ins come in. And I have two kind of ways of looking at this. And what you'll notice about my system in Notion is I like to keep things relatively simple. So it won't always be the prettiest system, but it will be effective. And that's the priority for me. So weekly check-ins. Now that we have an idea about our passion system, we can then start to go to the week-to-week basis, because this is where we're going to be checking in on, every Sunday when we plan this out. On Monday, Tuesday, we wake up. What are we doing today? And the key thing here is that you'll see these projects and tasks. What this is showing you is the tasks that you have in progress or to do as part of this season. Because when you're planning out this week, you can then look to say, well, okay, I still have to create the sign-up form for Stan. Okay, Monday I'm doing this. I might move in the gym as reoccurring tasks. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got to go to the gym at some point. Maybe you go in the mornings, maybe you go in the afternoons or the evenings. Okay, so where do I have time when I plan everything out, when I put in my non-negotiables, the core parts of my life, where do I have time to add these other projects and tasks? Where makes logical sense? And when you have all of these things in front of you, you can do that. We have our tasks. And do you see why taking it from that high level vision to the passion board, to the seasons, to the project, to the task allows us to make a meaningful week that we're actually getting things done and not feeling overwhelmed. I'm not actually gonna lie, I'm really proud of this. So what you'll also see that I have in this system is my habit tracker. Now these aren't really to do with projects and tasks, because I think it's hard sometimes to have a habit tracker for things that are of course not routine. I'm not gonna be building out a stand store every week or every day of the week. And so these are for things that are more habitual. Things like my morning pages, gym, steps that you need to get, Bible study, reading, things of that nature so that you can also track those. And then the final part of this weekly check-in is just any checklists or any activities that are a bit more reoccurring to do with your passions and interests. So if content creation was the thing that you was focusing on this season, that passion, that interest, that skill, then maybe you do want some sort of checklist so that you can work out and track the work that you're doing. But if you do decide to download this, then all of this is customizable. And then you just have your monthly events. Very simple. Put in the things that you need to do in this month. So you have a calendar view of what's going on. And so now we have a really solid system to work with. But if you remember from the initial diagram I showed you, reflection was a key part of this and being able to iterate. And that's what leads us to the reflections and blameless post-mortem section of this organizer, right? The key here is that if you really want to make progress and get better, you have to remove shame and blame. And this comes from a concept that we have in tech, SRE specifically, that is called the blameless post-mortem. And it's predicated on this idea that you can't get the truth and honesty and best out of people if they are scared that they are going to be blamed, that they are going to feel shame, they're going to be in trouble. They just won't open up. And it's the same when you're going back and forth with your own brain. If there is blame and shame laced in that, you won't be honest. It will be so hard to really get the information needed to make progress. And so that's what these reviews are, both on a monthly and a seasonal level. What went well, but what didn't? What's that blameless post-mortem going to reveal? And the lessons that we can take forward, not only into the next month, but into the next season. And so using what I have here, I have been able to construct a life that allows me to have multiple passions and interests, develop them to a high standard without feeling overwhelmed, without that FOMO like I mentioned in the beginning. Now I'm going to skim over the next two sections because they're not part of the core system, but if you do decide to download this template, they are included. And this is a section called the passions themselves. Now, the reality is all of us have different passions, so there's no way that I could build a template just for you. But I have included some examples of the passions and the interests and skills that I have so that you can use this as a starting point. For example, I have the template that I use for my content creation and the flow so that you can use that if you want. If you are building out a YouTube channel or short form content or a LinkedIn, then you can use this and any of the templates that I have associated with it. But if you're doing something with more of a visual element, then you can use the art journal as a start, where you're able to fill these out in a very similar way. You add a new page, And you'll be able to populate it with an image of the work that you're doing, ideas about the concept, the tools, what worked, what would you do differently. Similarly, if it's got a technical nature, you might want to follow the template here, which has, if you've got a challenge that you're doing as part of it, like a coding challenge, you might document that there. Or if you have something like projects that you're keeping track of, or if you're actually studying these in the theoretical and you want to put that in a single place, you might have that here. And so you have pages built out that look like this. And finally, you'll have your bookshelf. And I think a lot of people who have multiple passions and interests often also are people who are big on books and research. And therefore you can use this to kind of document the books, the research, and those things of those natures that fall under reading list effectively. And interestingly, you can link them to your seasons and your projects again. And what that means is I can view the things that I have been reading by project or by season, because they're all going to be filtered by that. And it's a very connected system. And I know that seemed like a lot, but I did really want to show you this and how it works, how it all comes together. I don't know if this 2-camera thing has worked, but hi. And so that's it. That's the Renaissance organizer and the passion system that I use to manage all of my interests. The beautiful thing is that the more that you interact with this system, going through the processes, the frameworks, the pages, the more it becomes second nature, to the point you will find yourself doing this whether your Notion or your notes page is open or not. Every time you want to make a change or think about bringing something in, your brain will start to go through this process automatically. As mentioned, the template is going to be linked in the description if you would like to download that for Notion. Otherwise, catch up with some of the other videos on this topic, and I'll see you in the next video.